Hi students, welcome to Module 5. This is the first of three modules that we're going to be covering interpreting for the educational field. So in this first module, Module 5, I'm going to be covering what it means to interpret for special education programs in the K to 12 school districts in California. Once again, you're going to have three modules in which we're going to be covering the IEP. They're called IEP, or the Individualized Educational Program, or short for IEP. So the objectives for this presentation, I'm briefly going to go over laws related to education and language access. If you've taken my BA 130 class, this is repetitive because it is important to know the laws that pertain to language access. So just bear with it. And also the special education glossary, please, everybody needs to download it and have it readily available for your assignments. And then I'll go ahead and explain your assignments. So on your own time, if you can please go to the following links and make sure that you read those documents over. This is very important because you need to learn what is a limited English proficient student, the category, and what does the law said about those categories and what are the rights of students. So basically, I know that many of you have mentioned, especially in your introductions, that for many years you were unofficial or maybe still are interpreters for family and friends. So one place where this commonly happens is at the school setting, right? I mean, I remember when my daughters were growing up and I would go and help in the PTA, they would always ask me at the office if I could translate for such parent or ex-parent, right? And according to the law, this is not allowed. However, many school districts do this, but this is not allowed. So, are the school districts supposed to give you information in your language? Yes. So, the schools must communicate to limited English proficient or LEPs in a language they can understand. And again, this is just not Spanish, but in any language that they need. If not, if they don't have those materials, they need to get someone to translate those materials. But this does not happen very often. So are schools in violation of this? Yes, they are. And that includes everything from course catalogs, parent handbooks, reports cards, anything that has to do with discipline and letters, especially, they have to be interpreted into the English, limited English proficient parents' main language. So, what does the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division say when it comes to asking someone, like for example, what I mentioned, my case, to interpret at a school district? At the time, I was not um, an employee of the school district, right? So here the question poses, may my child's school ask my child, other students, or untrained school staff to translate or interpret for me? This is the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. So this is a federal law, and it says no. The answer is no. And take notes because this is a question in your upcoming quiz. So schools must provide translation or interpreting from an appropriate and competent individuals and may not rely or ask the students, siblings, friends, or entering school staff to translate or interpret. However, we see this happening very common, and I'm sure you do too. Here I have some very important links for you to review what the Department of California, what are some of the policies in relationship to language access. So, for example, equal access, and this was said by a law. You don't need to remember the law, but the law is here as a reference that everyone needs to have equal access to services available in your language, right? And again, I mentioned that interpreters translate materials of information and services such as handbooks and letters. They need to be provided in the language. So a person has the right to interact with the California Department of Education in a language that best ensures meaningful access to program and services at no cost to them. So this is free. This is a part of a free public education. Okay, so again, only in the event of an emergency, the California Department of Education, through its many school districts called K to 12. Well, many districts are not kindergarten. I There's some districts I worked in the past in just the high school district, so it could be just a maybe just an elementary school district, maybe a district that has K to middle school, or maybe all the way to high school. Or in my case, I've worked in the past in just a high school district, and currently I work in a district that is a K to 12, meaning that everything from kindergarten up until the 12th grade in high school. So only in the event of an emergency, yes, you can be asked, okay? But it is to obtain non-essential information, such as identifying the language and something that must be perhaps like again in an emergency, just like demographic information regarding the student. So schools must have interpreters. This is a must have. That is why there's so many jobs that are open for interpreters. All complaints against the school, even though the Department of Education is the one that has this specific laws and that they follow also the federal law, they refer all the complaints that have to deal with language access to the school district. This is very important for you to know if you want to work in education. So all complaints are directly with the school districts. So here in module 5, you're only going to review the material. It could be very daunting because IEP is a monster in itself, the process, and I've been on both sides of the spectrum, if you want to call it that, on both sides of this huge system, educational system in which I've been an interpreter. I've been an interpreter because of my district. There was a legal case. There's some cases where parents are have to resort to attorneys and special agencies to come and help them with any issue they might be having that is hard to resolve. That there's a conflict, a resolution to get to a resolution with a particular school district. So at one point in time, I was asked to be an interpreter for the IEP in a legal case, and that took about 5 months. So I am very familiar with the IEP terminology from both ends of the spectrum. So as an interpreter, helping out in not only that IEP but in others IEPs, and at my previous school district, which was only a high school district, and then currently I've also have the experience from the special education teacher because I taught economics and to seniors and US government to seniors and English 10 for just the special education program. So now I am writing and I am filling out all this. Seems like millions of forms, right? But it's very daunting. But the interpreter only has to interpret. So don't let this overwhelm you. So, especially because it's very repetitive. So if you're interested, do not get overwhelmed. Do not get intimidated by the amount of material you're going to see. I post this material in the module because I want you to be as familiar as you can. Every district is going to have different forms. It's impossible to show you, hey, this is the form and this is going to be the form for all the districts in California, because that does not happen, unfortunately. I believe there should be uniform, but for some reason they're not. So every county office of education has a SELPA, which is the educational local plan for special education. They provide support services for the school districts that are under that specific county. So I've included some reference material there. Why? Because it's important. Here I have that there's some suggestions if you're going to be interpreting for education, because you need to research your area that you're going to be doing, right? Are you going to be dealing with financial aid terminology? Is there going to be a career or college fair at your school district? You need to learn special education terminology, then the first thing you need to do is download the special education Spanish glossary that we have available for you. Are you going to be doing IEP? So we want you to be well-rounded. And that's why I'm spending 3 modules just on IEP. So this one is the module with the introductions, and for you to it's very impossible for me to say for you to really have a grasp, because it's very difficult to get a grasp. There's so many forms. What I don't want you to concentrate in learning all the forms. That would not meet a purpose. What I want you to do, and the takeaway is for you to look at the big picture And just realize that there's a lot of repetitive language. So don't get overwhelmed. There's a lot of repetitive language in doing this IEPs, and I've seen huge improvement in interpreters that I've seen throughout the years doing the IEPs. So, the most important thing again is do your research, have your glossaries ready. Also, your own districts. I know some of you are preparing to apply for this job, so look at what the district already has and say, hey, can I look at your Spanish forms? Would you be able to print them for me so I can start getting familiarized with the language? They will do this for you because they're trying to recruit in every single school district, mostly for IEPs and the special education program. So again, do not reinvent the wheel. Everything is already out there for you. Is it complicated? Yes, it is complicated, but all the wording and all the translation has already been done. You have the glossary there. So the main challenging words, the bulk of the work has already been done. So you just need, like everything, like if you were prepared to become a legal interpreter, you have to learn the terminology. So the same thing here. If you're applying for special education interpreting jobs, then you just need to learn the terminology in special education. So watch the video so you can understand what is the difference between a 504 plan and an IEP. And again, you're going to review the forms. There's a link there from Santa Clara County. This is the SELPA that I found, very, very extensive forms. But just to give you an idea, but again, they are very different. The districts that I work for, the forms are very different. I posted this one because this is one of the ones that is very similar throughout the districts, because this is where you would write, where a teacher writes the goals. So this is where I write the goals as a special education teacher for my students. And I will have in the next module, I'm actually going to write some goals and I'm going to read them, and your job is going to be to interpret them. And more on that on module 6. It's very important for you to also be aware of what type of disabilities are we talking about, because there's different. For example, I just teach in the moderate special education. There's other teachers that are trained to teach in severe. I do not teach in severe. Okay, I teach just in the moderate, and that could be anybody who has even a maybe just a speech problem, or maybe a vision problem. There's a lot of learning disabilities of my students that are not visible, right? So it could be multiple disabilities. Someone might be in the program because they have one or two. So it varies. So these are the ones that are the criteria to be able to be eligible for an IEP. Again, do not overwhelm yourself. This is an excellent manual that I found from Riverside County a few years back when I was doing research on IEPs, because this is very comprehensive. If you're not planning to go into the educational field, then don't spend time on this. However, if you are, download it, have it ready, and familiarize yourself. But you do not need to learn, or this is just for you to have the big picture of what the form and the process looks like. Remember, the special education teachers are the ones that write everything. You're just there to translate, to interpret. Okay, so we're just going to be talking about the interpreting form. Later on, I'm going to be touching about the other part of the translations that the interpreters also do. Most importantly is for all of you to download the glossary, because one of your assignments has to do with this glossary. So this is the one, it's provided by the federal government. And this is the one that has the main um, terms that are used in an IEP. So it's very important for you to have it, because you're going to do homework 5 using this glossary. I do not want you to look up the words online. I give you the 10 words and you're going to get them from this glossary. Believe it or not, I have actually done this before in some classes where students, even though I gave them the list of 10 words, they get it wrong. They do not go and copy the one from the glossary. So if you do not give me the translation from the glossary, either in English or Spanish, because I ask you for some to translate to Spanish and for some to give me the English translation, I will give you, I will take away points. So here, just again, this is just for the IEP, and it's just to keep in mind, right? Just very very basic things because you're going to be given correction keys. You need to watch the subject verb agreement. In this case, your correction keys are the forms that are already provided for you in Spanish. I use the Spanish glossary. And again, you are going to do an audio, you're going to do an interpreting beginning in Module 6 and also in Module 7. That is how we're going to practice IEPs. For your class exercise 5, you're going to review everything that I mentioned before this slide in terms of the movie, that the video that explains the differences between an IEP and a 504. Make sure you answer the questions there. You have to write an essay, no less than 2 paragraphs, answering the questions there about an IEP because I want you to go and I want you to review the forms and then I ask you questions based on your review. And so this is an introductory section for IEP, so I want you to understand before we can move on to Module 6 of what is an IEP, what are the forms, what is the purpose. I need you to understand it fully so that when you do the interpreting, you're going to be able to understand. And then lastly, the discussion has to do with a situation of a limited English student, the limited English population, and this is a 10-year-old Maggie calling into a radio station. So follow the instructions there, and I ask you some questions there in terms of what this entails and how you can relate to that. Again, all the deadlines, make sure you check the Sunday of that week unless I move a certain quiz to another deadline, or just make sure that you keep on top of those deadlines. The announcements, thank you for those of you that are submitting bloopers, and also very important for you to listen to the weekly audios posted in the announcement section in your Canvas homepage, because this is where I give you the heads up. This is where I review what you're doing, what you're assigned for that particular module. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the week.